Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, you've brought us a set of sources that take us deep into American fiction, but honestly, a world so focused on generational trauma, it almost reads like a history text.
It really does.
Our source material is Ron Currie's novel, The Savage, Noble Death of Babs Dionne.
And it is a descent. I mean,
Yeah.
it forces us to look at history not just as a timeline, but as something that's relational. We're going to be tracking this really furious, short burst of action in 2016.
Just a few summer days.
Exactly. Just a few days in Waterville, Maine. But every single choice made in those few days is completely governed by decisions, betrayals, and acts of violence from centuries before.
And that's really the mission of this deep dive, isn't it? To trace that long, bloody thread of defiance and cultural identity. We're going inside this Franco-American neighborhood they call Little Canada. And we're tracking how one woman, Babs Dionne, becomes this ferocious, uncompromising matriarch who has to face a final reckoning. The novel argues that your ancestors aren't just footnotes. They're, quote, real people and still breathing through you.
Exactly. The narrative frames it as you, the listener, being an entity that actually spans centuries. You're just finding your current but by no means final iteration right now. We can't understand why Babs acts with such finality in 2016 unless we see her violence as a necessary response to the abandonment her family felt all the way back in 1668.
So the pain isn't just a memory.
No, it's an active, inherited trauma that is demanding to be resolved.
Okay, let's unpack this. And to really understand the roots of Babs's world, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the 17th century.
Our story really starts with the very first link in Babs Dionne's ancestral chain, a woman named Evangeline Lenormand.
And Evangeline was a Parisian orphan. Crucially, the source says she's a cynic. She arrives in what was then called Nouvelle France in 1667.
She's one of the famous filles du roi,
The king's daughters.
right, sent over by Louis XIV to basically boost the colonial population through rapid marriage.
This point of origin is so essential to the family's DNA, isn't it? The story they were sold was, romantic opportunity, noble husbands, rich farmlands, a fresh start.
But the reality, which Evangeline the cynic already suspected, was much, much darker. They were basically economic commodities. They were shipped across a brutal ocean to be bartered for the cost of their passage and a quick dowry.
And that journey itself, it was catastrophic. The source material paints this incredibly vivid picture.
Oh, it does.
Months at sea, the ship rolling constantly, the air just thick with the smell of shit and wet rot. 10 girls died and were just thrown overboard. A dozen more went insane with fever. But somehow, Evangeline stays healthy.
And this health, this bit of luck, it proves questionable almost immediately. She lands, she gets married quickly, as intended. The ratio of men to women was something like 8 to 1.
So the odds were not in her favor.
Not at all. Her husband was a Scottish fur trader, Joshua Currie. They had no common language, which the text really uses as a symbol of their, fundamental disconnection.
It wasn't a marriage, it was a transaction.
A pure transaction. Joshua Currie takes her dowry, her trousseau, the chest of goods she brought, and the 50 livres, the cash gift from the king. And by the fall of 1673, he's just gone.
He abandons her.
Abandons her with 2 infant daughters, Dominique and Madeleine. And this isn't just some historical anecdote. This is the foundational trauma of the Dionne family. It's the original sin of abandonment, where the French identity, Evangeline, is exploited for a quick cash grab.
And that's what Babs is still fighting centuries later.
Yes. The idea that her community is disposable, that their love and labor can just be taken for some paltry sum.
So let's fast forward from the 17th century woods of Quebec to industrial Maine in the 20th century. The family moves from a French colony to an American ghetto, which brings us to Little Canada.
Right. We're now focusing on Babs's grandfather, a man named Leonard Levesque. He makes this arduous journey to Waterville, Maine in 1918.
He's escaping starvation in Quebec, but he's walking into a different kind of hell.
A very different kind. You've got the Spanish flu epidemic raging, and crucially, you have the very real, very violent presence of the Ku Klux Klan in Maine, which was targeting Catholic immigrants like him.
And what pulled him there was the mill. The Hollingsworth and Whitney, the H&W paper mill, this place becomes the absolute center of their entire existence.
It defined their economy, their geography, their health, everything. And the source is just unsparing in the details of the human cost of that mill.
It's staggering.
Leonard and all 10 of his sons, including Babs's father, Andre, they all worked there. And the accumulated damage is laid out like this grim family ledger of suffering. Between them, they lost 4 fingers, a right hand at the wrist, and most of a right foot.
That framing is so chilling. A collective family sacrifice. They didn't just work the mill, they literally gave parts of their bodies to it, generation after generation.
And that leads us to this one specific tragic moment with Babs' youngest uncle, Paul Levesque.
Paul was crushed from the knees down.
By an avalanche of spruce logs. It was a constant danger in the log yard. An inexperienced picker pulled the wrong stick, and that was it.
This is a pivotal event. His legs are destroyed. He's crippled for life. And the compensation for this life-altering trauma.
$4,000 total. For both legs, it's an insulting, paltry sum, and it connects right back to Evangeline's trauma. A life destroyed for a quick, cynical economic exchange.
But there's a twist.
A huge twist. That $4,000, the value of Uncle Paul's entire future, becomes the capital that founds the community's only local business, Levesque's Variety.
So the business that gave Little Canada its only piece of economic independence was literally built on the severed limbs of one of their own.
Paid for by the Anglo power structure that crippled him, precisely. And Levesque's Variety became the heart of Little Canada. It was the emotional center, the linguistic center, a pocket of defiance where French was still spoken openly, right in the middle of a town that wanted to erase them.
So that sets the stage for Babs's own awakening in 1968. This is where personal trauma and national chaos just collide with Little Canada's history.
Nationally, you've got the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy. Locally, Babs is dealing with the death of her brother, Gene.
Her older brother.
He's flown home from Da Nang in a flag-draped casket, only to be buried in St. Francis Cemetery. And the source material points out with this furious clarity that this wasn't a proper cemetery at all.
No, it was half a dozen acres of crabgrass at the edge of a hill where people dumped their trash.
The imagery is just, it's so powerful. It perfectly articulates the contempt they felt. Their war hero brother is buried next to a rusty, discarded washing machine.
And this is the background for Babs' big moment. She's 14 years old, working the register at Levesque's Variety.
This is the environment that creates the matriarch. Babs watches the Waterville police, the Waterville PD, routinely steal from her Uncle Paul. And it wasn't subtle. It was an open assertion of power.
Taking sandwiches, Pop-Tarts.
All the way up to profound theft, like a shift sergeant who was rumored to have stolen a brand new Carver runabout. The PD used Paul's business as their own personal, tax-free commissary.
And how does Uncle Paul respond?
Submission. The man who founded the store on the proceeds of his own ruined legs just tells Babs, "Sorry, Simplement. Just smile. Pop-Tarts don't cost anything." He was trying to survive.
But Babs saw it as a profound betrayal.
She sees her whole family, the entire neighborhood, anglicizing their names, accepting the theft, playing a rigged game, and to her, this is dishonorable, calm, and vile submission, a phrase from Shakespeare that just burns into her teenage brain. She thinks the acceptance is worse than the injury itself.
And this brings us to the specific target of all that rage. Scott Markey.
Scott Markey, born Sacha Marquette. He is the ultimate symbol of that vile submission. He changed his name, refused to speak French, converted to Protestantism.
He did everything he could to erase himself.
And moved out of Little Canada to the proper north end of town, all to become a cop. So in Babs's eyes, he erased his own heritage, just to get the authority to prey on the very people he came from.
You know, what's fascinating here is that complex link between 3 centuries of being marginalized. From Evangeline's stolen dowry to the mill's toxic waste to that garbage dump grave, and Babs's very specific act of violence against Markey.
It's history exploding.
This isn't just random rage.
Not at all. It's the culmination of historical identity refusing, finally, to be erased. Babs realizes the only way to break that cycle of submission is through an act so profound it can't be ignored, and she anticipates it. By July, she's taken her dead brother Gene's paratrooper knife, and she keeps it under the counter.
The symbol of her murdered brother will become the instrument of her defining violence. Let's transition now to that central moment, the origin story that gives the novel its title.
The savage, noble death of Babs Dionne.
The fuse is lit on August 1st, 1968. Babs is just 14, sweating in her Karl Jastrzemski jersey, and she sees Scott Markey's name in the credit ledger.
With his unpaid balance right next to it, $26.70.
And she decides this. This petty, almost meaningless debt is the line in the sand for the entire community.
She tells Markey it's due today. And he responds with this pure institutional condescension, telling her, "You're a kid, Barbara, so you don't understand how this works." The implication being, police are above the law.
And this is where Babs consciously decides to just pour gasoline on the fire. She openly calls her Uncle Paul a coward, just like the rest of them, for submitting to the theft. She knows she is crossing a line her family has been trained for generations not to cross.
And Marky, feeling his authority challenged by a teenager, he escalates too. He brings up her dead brother, Gene, and reminds her that cops like him are draft exempt. He's basically saying, your family sacrifices its children while I'm protected and I get to steal from your crippled uncle.
Babs' provocation in return is just shocking and deeply personal.
It is. She lies, says she's no longer virgin, tells Marky you're too late to claim that prize, and then she challenges his masculinity directly, calls him a limp dick when you want to attack her. It's a brilliant, terrifying strategy. She's targeting his shame and his entitlement.
And it works.
Oh, it works. He snaps. He lifts her clear off the ground with no evident effort whatsoever, slams her against the counter, and jams his knuckles into her nose, drawing blood. The text compares the blood to melted ice cream. It's just this sickeningly visceral detail.
And she realizes she miscalculated. He's not just angry, he might actually kill her.
His rage is described as simian, his eyes black puddles of ink. She reaches for Gene's knife, but it's too far away. This is the moment when all those generations of submission almost claim Babs as just another casualty.
But she's saved by the most mundane thing.
The simple interruption of daily life in Little Canada. Bernadette Roy, an old widow, shuffles in with her walker to pay for some Winstons she was undercharged for.
And the change in Scott Markey is immediate and grotesque. The rage just evaporates, replaced by that officer-friendly smile as he wipes Babs' blood on his trousers.
But Babs gets the last word. She wipes the blood from her nose and uses the language he tried to erase to seal their conflict. It's a public shaming in her native tongue.
Pay ce que tu dois, connard.
Pay what you owe, asshole. He leaves, smiling, but the line has been drawn. And the future Babs, looking back, realizes her mistake was thinking she had won. She learns a lesson she would carry forever. She would never again assume one was beaten until they were dead.
Less than a month later, August 26th, the violence is revisited. Scott Markey finds Babs and her best friend, Rita, who will later become her sister-in-law near the river.
And the description of the assault is deliberately disjointed. It's just a sequence of sensory details that emphasize the terror and confusion. The smell of his aftershave, pine needles on her back, the distant sound of a basketball.
But her internal thought is so profound. Lying there, under his weight, this 14-year-old girl thinks about the irony of living so close to Maine's famous rocky coastline, but having never seen the ocean.
She feels completely isolated, like she could be in landlocked Nebraska. It emphasizes the emotional and geographic prison of Little Canada.
And it's in that moment of absolute isolation that she acts.
The steel of Jean's paratrooper knife is in her pocket, then in her palm. The act itself is described with this brutal, chilling precision. The click of the blade, the slight hitch as it catches a rib, the puncture of his lung, and then the air whistling out. Urgently, then softly, then silence.
And immediately after, Babs does something symbolic that completely shifts the power structure. She doesn't just run, she takes his keyring.
She understands his true authority wasn't his badge or his gun. Those could be replaced. It was the keys that gave him access to, and thus ownership of, everything in Little Canada. She physically takes that control.
Her walk back into town is this moment of communal, almost sacred recognition, naked from the waist down, covered in his blood.
And the people who see her, they just stop. They watch in complete silence. They recognize the horror and mystery of the moment. The source material says it's a state beyond language, that they saw the holy solemnity of the blood, a sacrament of defiance finally achieved.
This is an inversion of their trauma. Babs, exposed and bleeding, becomes this righteous symbol, and the community responds not by submitting, but by protecting her.
Right. As she walks, she passes Jean's grave, and the phone calls flooding the local switchboard about the blood-slathered girl delay the police just long enough for her to reach sanctuary.
And that sanctuary is Notre Dame Parish. Inside, Babs, ever the cynic, is looking at the Stations of the Cross. She finds the Christian narrative that to suffer is to be divine, to be a little too convenient for a country that inflicts so much suffering.
A crucial insight into her worldview. She notes that if Jesus had been executed in America, everyone she knew would probably wear a little gold electric chair around their neck. She rejects the glorification of suffering. She only wants the power to end it.
She finds Father Clement, who understands the stakes immediately. He's meticulous about the confessional seal. He makes sure she knows. What she says is known only to God and can't be compelled from him by any man.
Giving her an impenetrable shield.
And she confesses with this chilling directness, I killed Scott Markey. When Clement asks why, she just says, "The same reason I came in here with no pants on," and then, "He raped me."
And Father Clement's response is immediate and pragmatic. He shows his loyalty is to his flock, not to secular law. He hasn't prayed for Scott's soul. He immediately focuses on saving Babs.
The plan is set in motion. She has to leave Waterville immediately, go to Vermont, become a novitiate with the Sisters of St. Joseph.
And that's the tragic irony of her defiance, isn't it? The ultimate act of French resistance, killing the betraying cop, results in her immediate mandatory exile. She's saved, but she can never come home. Her life is defined by that one moment of violence, safety, and separation.
So Babs lives in that exile for nearly 5 decades. Let's jump forward to July 1st, 2016, and look at the modern consequences, the family she left behind, and the new predators she's facing.
By 2016, Babs is back, and she has consolidated her power. She is the matriarch. She leads the Council of Women, including Carmeline and Stella, and they maintain total control over Little Canada.
Primarily through a hyper-localized pharmaceutical opioid trade.
Her authority is absolute, built on the reputation of what she did in 1968.
And we see that iron will directed internally, especially at her fractured family. Her daughter, Sis, or Celeste, is missing, lost to meth and desperation. And Sis's husband, Bruce Cote, the father of her grandson, Jason, is an abusive alcoholic.
Babs's physical strength is still terrifyingly present. The sources describe her physically confronting Bruce for hitting Jason, lifting the grown man clear off the ground with no evident effort whatsoever.
She's determined to prevent Jason, the next generation, from suffering the same submission she saw her family endure.
And the survival of French identity is literally represented in Jason. He secretly speaks Quebecois, a language his assimilating father forbids. Babs sees him as the one thread worth protecting.
But maintaining this power has cost her. She ruthlessly enforces loyalty, even banishing her de facto sister Rita for questioning her. When Rita says, "You're not nice," Babs' response is just ice cold.
Way I remember it. My parents never legally adopted you. Just weaponizing the past constantly.
This internal fracture is then compounded by the return of Babs' other daughter, Lori Dionne.
A staff sergeant, just back from Wardak province in Afghanistan. And Lori is suffering profoundly from PTSD and addiction. She's haunted.
Her trauma manifests as these vivid hallucinations of her dead comrade, Sammy Menendez, who often appears, bizarrely, in a Santa suit.
A grotesque distortion of innocence and comfort.
Lori's psychological state is laid bare through this powerful analogy she uses. She describes being high up in a burning building. The jump isn't something you want, but it's a slight preference for falling over having your ass burned to a crisp.
And she notes that the people watching on the ground, they only see the fall. They don't see the fire that forced the choice. It's her way of articulating the suicidal impulse fueled by her trauma.
This self-destructive spiral leads to an overdose. She's revived with Narcan by a paramedic who just greets her with, "Welcome back, asshole."
Chillingly casual. She's living on the margins, encouraged by the ghost of Sammy, who tells her life doesn't seem as great or precious as we all think when we're alive. He says from the perspective of the dead, life is a real pain in the balls, mostly.
And Babs immediately puts Lori's lethal competence to use. She tasks Lori with recovering stolen drugs from their trade operation. This leads her right to her nephew, Tim, Rita's son,
Who is an addict and stealing their supply. And Lori, upholding Babs' brutal sense of order, she informs the police, condemns her own nephew to jail.
She chooses the organization over family.
Every time. It shows how Babs' unforgiving rule just contaminates the next generation.
While the Dionnes are tearing themselves apart, an external threat arrives. This is the man traveling in a bone-white Chevy Impala.
And the man is defined as an elemental, amoral, impervious to reasoning enforcer. He's been set to figure out why Waterville has grossly underperformed in sales for his boss, a figure named Ogopogo.
Which instantly raises the stakes from local crime to international predation.
And his backstory, while a bit bizarre, is critical. He was a student at Pierre's School of Cosmetology, an almost perfect student. He was the first person to shave 20 balloons without popping a single one.
A feat of lethal precision.
That even his instructor, Arthur Attila Pepin, couldn't do. And Pepin, consumed by envy, conspired to make the man fail his final exam, shaving Pepin's throat with an obsidian razor.
He arranges a cough, hoping a tiny movement will cause a nick and deny the man his destiny as valedictorian.
But the obsidian blade was 500 times sharper than steel. Pepin's slight movement resulted in the blade slicing his carotid artery, and all the blood north of Pepin's shoulders draining as from a spigot. The man's perfection was literally lethal, and it still cost him his destiny.
So he learned that perfection doesn't guarantee a reward.
Exactly. And you see that coldness when he talks to a state trooper he meets. He asks the statey if he has a sense of imminent doom that goes beyond petty concerns, something on a proper biblical scale. He connects it to Carl Sagan's idea that life would almost always destroy itself before it had the capacity for interstellar travel.
He sees himself as an agent of that self-destruction.
He quickly asserts his power over the established order. He confronts the police chief, Daryl Bates, using a fake name just to prove he has access to Bates's private world. And Bates is already struggling. His wife, Melinda, has advanced Alzheimer's.
Right. She can't answer Jeopardy questions, but can't recognize her own husband.
And the man's message is clear. He demands Bates introduce him to whoever is really running Waterville. His boss is Ogopogo, also known as the White Hand, the Sapon du Nord, the Pale King, a figure responsible for 24 law enforcement deaths since 1995.
And he uses the Gollum story as this chilling metaphor for Babs and her organization.
He suggests Babs may have unleashed a force to defend her community, but she should never mistake that for actually controlling it. He's telling Bates to surrender control to Ogopogo, or face annihilation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting as we dive into the undercurrents of Little Canada's economy. We've established the H&W mill is the source of all this suffering, but Babs hates it while also acknowledging it fed her family.
It's a source of both life and death. The source material is explicit about the biological damage. Generations of Francos suffering from headaches, asthma, leukemia, birth defects, all trace back to the mill's toxic discharge, the black liquor.
And for context, black liquor is this highly corrosive, toxic byproduct of the pulping process.
It was routinely dumped. Babs notes that the men who worked in the washroom who had to wade through this stuff were basically given a guaranteed cancer ticket. And their pain was just dismissed as the inescapable misfortune of being dumb Frenchmen.
So Babs' ultimate fantasy is vengeance. She dreams of using 500 pounds of TNT her late husband, Riel, bought during the strike years to level the now-defunct mill.
It's not just property damage. It's a symbolic, explosive act of political cleansing, destroying the physical manifestation of their exploitation.
While Babs is focused on the past, Lori is just trying to survive the present. She's high on oxy, driving aimlessly, trying to catch air on North Pond Road, going 85-miler.
She's trying to find meaning in that post-war void. She's seeking the rush of combat, that mix of the inevitability of what crossed with the uncertainty of when.
And after she spins out, she has this vision that forces her to look inward, the fox god.
She sees a fox on the shoulder of the road, carrying a dead chicken, placid as the Buddha himself. And she perceives the fox as God herself, not a judging deity, but one that reveals truth.
It reflects Lori back to herself,
forcing her to integrate all her identities. Woman, daughter, addict, marine, killer, but also lover, hero, seeker, and seer. It's a moment of radical, non-judgmental self-acceptance.
This emotional landscape is the backdrop for the meeting between Babs and the man. They meet in the abandoned H&W washroom.
The exact place that gave Franco men cancer. Babs chooses this toxic, politically charged location.
The man opens by saying Waterville has grossly underperformed because Babs's pharmaceutical trade is interfering with Ogopogo's heroin trade. It's an ultimatum.
But Babs refuses to discuss it as a business dispute. She immediately pivots and asks him if he is Catholic or Protestant. She forces centuries of conflict into the room.
The man is thrown. He admits he's Lutheran but not religious and says dogmatic differences are not the point of contention here.
He sees it as purely economic. But Babs insists it is the issue at hand. For her, this is still the same fight. The Catholic French community being stuck in ghettos, forced to assimilate by men who observe the man's traditions. The money is just the latest form of Anglo oppression.
And then Babs performs her greatest psychological feat.
She identifies his true motivation. He goes beyond business or fear. She realizes he's driven by this deep desire to please Ogopogo, suggesting an almost romantic devotion.
She cuts right through his cold facade, saying, I get it, not your boss, your lover.
This insight confirms that Babs fully grasps the personal intensity needed to drive these amoral forces. But the irony is, by seeing him so clearly, she escalates the danger exponentially. He cannot return to Ogopogo without her complete submission, and Babs has just confirmed that submission is impossible.
This pressure cooker just bursts, leading to violent consequences within Babs's family, and the first casualty is Sis.
After days away, high on meth, desperate, Sis returns home on Monday night, July 1st.
And Bruce, her husband, is drunk, In a chilling moment, she misinterprets his drunken fumbling for love, but he puts his hands around her throat and squeezes.
The only thing that stops him is their son Jason, intervening, screaming, "Don't you hurt my ma."
As Sis flees, she goes to Rex White, a crank and meth dealer who is also, chillingly, a self-admitted serial killer.
He claims to be more prolific than some, less than others.
And Sis, wanting to end her suffering, asks Rex to kill her. He refuses, saying he cared about her too much.
Instead, as this twisted act of affection, he strands her at the salvage yard by pulling her car's starter fuse. He excommunicates her from his drug supply, so she desperately calls her Aunt Rita, confessing she's spun out of my mind and begging for secrecy.
This call is the catalyst for Rita's explosion. She is furious. Her own son, Tim, is facing jail because of Babs and Lori. She sees Sis's arrival as the ultimate entitlement.
She feels this peculiar and alarming pressure building inside her, the accumulated rage of decades.
In a moment of just sheer emotional overload, Rita throws her glass of Chianti at Sis's face.
An act of civilized, dignified anger, but the consequence is instantly lethal. Sis shrieks, steps back, misses the edge of the porch, falls, and smashes her head against a paving stone on Rita's perfectly level walkway.
The wine and blood mingle. Rita, instantly sober, shifts into this Babs-like pragmatic mode and executes a horrifyingly efficient cover-up.
She cleans the porch, drives Sis's corpse to the salvage yard, pours turpentine over the car, and ignites it, which leads to that casual media report.
No.
Unidentified woman was found burned in a car.
Meanwhile, Lori finds the burnt car, drawn by the smell of smoke. She finds a locket, takes Adderall to get over her fear, and storms Rex White's farmhouse.
She shoots the door open, neutralizes him, and forces Bates to arrest him.
But Rex, from his hospital bed, maintains his innocence in the murder. He claims the real killer was motivated by passion or profit and insists the police will just pin it on him, the local serial killer, unless Lori finds the truth.
And Lori, showing her intelligence, uses the only clue she has, a mention of a taxi to trace a call log. It confirms a pickup near Vassalboro. She confronts Rita, who confesses immediately.
This is the moment Lori has to choose: upholding Babs's external justice or protecting her family from it.
She chooses the latter, but forces Rita to return to Babs. Knowing the final judgment belongs to the matriarch, the family has to reassert its own broken justice system.
This all culminates in a final meeting: Babs, Bates, and Father Clement. Babs denies Rex is the killer. It's not him. She knows the truth is either Rita's accidental rage or possibly the Canadian organization.
While Babs prepares for war, the other councilwomen, Carmeline, Stella, Burnett, they try to make a deal, a final act of submission. They meet with the man to avoid Babs' fate.
But Babs intercepts the meeting.
And Babs, the ultimate product of defiance, kills the man, not with a gun, but with a piece of glass. Intimate and personal. Her final words to the women are devastating. I guess we're all fucked now, aren't we?
The 3 remaining councilwomen execute Babs a final message. They drive the man's corpse 9 hours to Quebec City, leave him on a bench on the Dufferin Terrace.
With his shirt airbrushed with the message, "Piss off, Canada!" A definitive rejection of Ogopogo's sovereignty, guaranteeing lethal retribution.
The consequences are instant. Ogopogo, enraged, dispatches the Thing, a team of special forces, wet work mercenaries, emotionless weapons delivery systems, to Waterville to kill Babs loudly and without mercy.
Before they arrive, Babs executes her final act of protection. She makes peace with Lori, allows her to take Jason away to safety, and tells her to explain it, the trauma, the history, the violence, to him when he's old enough. Then she arms herself with a shotgun and waits.
Father Clement visits one last time, and he confesses his own history. He entered the priesthood after his wife and baby died. This is when Babs understands him. He realized suffering is the only promise God makes.
He's not there to save her soul. He's just there to suffer with her.
The town itself is mirroring the chaos. People are fleeing a wildfire spreading from Fairfield, fueled by record heat. The end of Little Canada feels biblical.
Just like the man warned.
In her final moments, Babs and Rita see the fox in the driveway, the same fox god Lori saw. And Babs feels peace, realizing she was never, not once, been in control. She accepts her fate.
But not without one last dark joke to Rita, confirming her lifelong Catholic-Protestant antagonism. St. Peter won't let you into heaven unless you kill at least one Protestant before you get there. The struggle lasts until her final breath.
If we connect Babs's life and death to the bigger picture, you just see this tragic, cyclical nature of the family's fate.
Absolutely. Babs's violent act in 1968 led to her forced flight to a convent. Now Lori's trauma and her sister's death lead to her flight from Waterville to Boston, taking Jason with her.
The theme of submission versus defiance just translates into different forms of escape. The defiance of the past guarantees the exile of the future. The violence doesn't break the chain, it just alters the direction of the next flight.
And the novel gives us this haunting epilogue, 4 years later, the birth of Laurie's daughter, Evangeline Barbara Paraday, named for the earliest ancestor and the fiercest one.
Laurie moves the child to Southie in Boston and speaks only French to her, determined to preserve the identity Babs sacrificed everything for.
But that relentless process of assimilation is still at work. Evangeline's English overtakes her French in kindergarten, leading to what the text calls the first rift between mother and daughter. Laurie finds herself facing the exact same challenge her great-grandfather faced in 1918.
This generational battle over language is the truest, deepest conflict in the novel.
It persists until Laurie finally moves Evangeline to a community where the children do speak French. And it highlights the Kerouac quote the author uses as the epigraph. "We have to live in English. It's impossible to live in French." This is the secret thought of the Canuck in America.
So the language itself becomes the territory being fought over. Babs used violence to protect the physical survival of her community.
And Laurie uses physical relocation to protect the linguistic and cultural survival of her daughter. The entire narrative is this long, brutal history lesson showing that the fight against cultural erasure is exhausting, isolating, and often lethal. After all the sacrifices, from Evangeline's marriage to Babs's death, the question remains whether the modern world will just succeed where the mills and the police failed.
Not through active oppression, but through the overwhelming silent inevitability of assimilation. And it raises this huge, profound question for you, the listener, as you look at your own history. What specific part of your own ancestry, your own foundational story, are you currently fighting to preserve, even if the world around you says it's no longer relevant? What is your language, metaphorically speaking, that you are protecting?
That fight, the internal struggle between the inevitable and the essential, that's perhaps the truest, deepest dive of all.
Thank you for sharing the sources for this intense, deep dive into the world of Waterville, Little Canada, and the ferocious, noble legacy of Babs Dionne.